I still remember the exact moment everything shifted, though at the time, it didn't feel like a turning point. It felt like humiliation. It was a Sunday afternoon, early autumn, the kind of day when the air smells faintly of leaves and something ending. I had spent hours preparing lunch, not because anyone asked me to, but because I believed it still mattered. Traditions, family, the illusion of warmth. I cooked roasted lamb with rosemary, baked vegetables glazed with honey, and a lemon tart that used to be my husband's favorite. Years ago, these meals meant laughter, long conversations, and a sense that I belonged at the center of it all. Now they were just expected. I stood by the table, placing the final dish down, when Daniel walked in without even glancing at me. "Smells fine," he said casually, already scrolling through his phone. Fine. That word lingered longer than it should have. My daughter, Clara, followed behind him. She gave me a small, apologetic smile, the kind she had mastered over the years. A silent acknowledgement of something she would never say out loud. "You didn't have to cook so much, Mom," she said softly. I wiped my hands on a towel. I wanted to. That wasn't entirely true. We sat down. Plates were filled. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor. The usual sounds of a family meal, but something underneath was hollow. Daniel took a bite, chewed slowly, then frowned just slightly. "It's a bit dry," he said. I paused. Not because of the comment, but because of how easily it came to him. Clara immediately jumped in. "I think it's good." But she didn't look at me when she said it. Across the table, my two grandchildren were absorbed in their screens, occasionally laughing at something I couldn't see. I wondered when I had become background noise in my own life. I sat down last, folding my hands in my lap for a moment before picking up my fork. Then Daniel cleared his throat. That sound. I would later realize it was rehearsed. So he began leaning back slightly. "We should probably talk about the house." My grip tightened around the fork. "The house," I repeated. Clara shifted uncomfortably. Daniel nodded, as if discussing something completely ordinary. "Yes. We've been thinking, it's too big for you." Too big. Such a polite way to say unnecessary. "I've lived here for over 30 years, I said evenly. "I'm quite used to it." "That's exactly the problem," he replied. The room went quieter. He placed his fork down with deliberate precision, as if preparing for a business meeting rather than a family conversation. "It's inefficient," he continued. "Maintenance costs, taxes, utilities, it doesn't make sense anymore." I let out a small breath. "I manage just fine." Daniel smiled. Not kindly. "That's not really the point, Elizabeth." The way he said my name, like a correction, not an address. Clara finally spoke. "We just think maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere smaller." Comfortable. That word again. A different mask, same intention. "Where exactly?" I asked. Daniel answered before she could. "There's a residential complex outside the city. Quiet, secure. Designed for people in your stage of life." I almost laughed, but I didn't. "My stage of life?" I repeated. He shrugged. "You don't work. You don't run anything. You mostly stay at home." The words landed heavier than he probably intended, or maybe exactly as he intended. I placed my fork down carefully. "I built this home," I said. "I chose this land. I designed every room." "Yes," he said, nodding. "With your husband." There it was, the erasure. "As far as I understand," Daniel continued, "he handled the important parts. The business, the investments, the growth." Clara looked down. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Recognition. He went on, more confident now. "And now that he's gone, things need to be adjusted. Realistically. Realistically. Such a dangerous word in the wrong hands. And what exactly are you suggesting? I asked. Daniel leaned forward. That the house should be sold. Silence. Even the children looked up this time. Clara whispered, Daniel? But he didn't stop. You can move within the month, he added. We've already spoken to an agent. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Dangerously calm. You've spoken to an agent, I repeated. Yes. About my house. Our family asset, he corrected. I almost smiled. Almost. I see, I said quietly. He mistook my calmness for surrender. That was his first mistake. Clara reached for my hand. Mom, we just want what's best for you. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw not just my daughter, but someone who had slowly learned to stand beside power instead of questioning it. I'm not moving, I said. Daniel exhaled sharply, as if expecting resistance, but already prepared to crush it. That's not really your decision anymore. That sentence hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Or at least he thought it was. I stood up slowly. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just deliberately. You believe that? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Yes. I nodded. Then I smiled. Not warmly. Not politely. The kind of smile my husband used to recognize immediately, the one that meant I had already seen 10 steps ahead. Well, I said calmly, that makes tomorrow very interesting. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? I walked toward the cabinet near the window, opened the drawer, and took out a thin folder. I hadn't touched it in years. Not because it wasn't important, but because I had been waiting for the exact moment it would matter. I turned back to them, holding it lightly in my hand. My husband didn't leave things the way you think he did, I said. Daniel's expression shifted, just slightly. What is that? He asked. I tilted my head. Something you should have asked about before making decisions. Clara looked between us, confused. Mom, what are you talking about? I met her eyes. The truth, I said simply. Then I placed the folder on the table. And for the first time that afternoon, Daniel didn't speak. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind was finally awake again. For years, I had lived quietly inside my own life, letting things happen around me instead of shaping them. After my husband died, I stepped back. Not out of weakness, but out of exhaustion. Grief has a way of dulling even the sharpest instincts. And mine had once been razor sharp. But something about that dinner, about Daniel's voice, his certainty, his complete dismissal of me, it stirred something I had buried for far too long. I sat in the study long after everyone had gone to bed. The room hadn't changed. I had made sure of that. The same dark wood shelves, the same leather chair, the same faint scent of old paper and cologne that had long since faded, but somehow still lingered in my memory. This had been our space, mine and my husband's. Not his alone. Never his alone. People always assumed he was the mind behind everything. He let them believe it, and I let them underestimate me. I stood up slowly and walked toward the painting on the wall, a quiet landscape, nothing remarkable to an outsider. But behind it was something far more important than art. I moved it aside and revealed the safe. The key rested against my skin, hanging from a thin chain around my neck. I had worn it every day for years. Not out of sentiment, out of certainty. The lock clicked open smoothly. Inside, there were only a few documents. Nothing excessive, nothing dramatic, just enough to change everything. I took out the folder and placed it on the desk. My fingers rested on it for a moment. I remembered the last time I had opened it, just after the funeral. Back then, I couldn't bring myself to act. Everything felt too raw, too heavy, too immediate. Power means nothing when you can barely breathe. But now I was ready. I opened the folder. The agreement was exactly as I remembered, clear, precise, undeniable. A partnership contract from the very beginning of our company. Not symbolic, not informal, legal, binding. 51%. Mine. Always had been. And the clause that mattered most, control transferred fully to the surviving partner.
No ambiguity. No interpretation.
No, Daniel. I let out a slow breath. They never even asked. I murmured to myself. That was the second mistake. The phone rang suddenly, breaking the silence. I glanced at the screen.
Clara.
Of course. I answered. Mom, are you awake? Her voice was careful, almost fragile. Yes. A pause. I'm sorry about today. I leaned back in the chair. Are you? Another pause, longer this time. Daniel didn't mean it like that. I almost smiled. He said exactly what he meant. She exhaled softly. He's just under pressure. The company isn't doing as well as it should, and he thinks selling my home will fix that? It's not just the house, she said quickly. It's everything. He's trying to stabilize things. I closed my eyes for a moment. Clara, I said gently, does Daniel know who owns the company? Silence. Real silence this time. What do you mean? She asked slowly. I opened my eyes and looked at the document in front of me. I mean exactly what I asked. She hesitated. He runs it. After Dad passed, it just made sense. He's been there for years. That wasn't my question. Another pause. No, she admitted quietly. I don't think he knows anything different. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's what I thought. Mom, what's going on? I could hear the tension rising in her voice now. Not fear, but confusion. The kind that comes when the ground beneath you starts to shift. Your father and I built that company together, I said. Every decision, every risk, every strategy, we made them as partners. But you were never at the office, she said. I let out a soft laugh. I was at every important meeting, I replied. Just not in the way you think. She didn't respond. So I continued. Do you remember those nights when your father used to bring work home? All those reports spread across the table. Yes. Do you remember how they always looked different in the morning? A small pause. I thought he worked overnight. He didn't. Silence again. He couldn't, I added quietly. He used to fall asleep in that chair before midnight. So, who? I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. Oh my God, she whispered. I could almost see her face, the realization settling in, piece by piece. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked. Because it didn't matter, I said simply. Not then. And now? Now it does. I heard movement on her end. A door closing. Lowered voices in the background. Daniel, probably. Mom, Daniel is going to lose his mind if this is true. That's not my concern. He's been running everything. And how has that been going? I asked calmly. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. He's calling it a restructuring, she said finally. There's a board meeting tomorrow morning. I know. You know? Yes. Another silence. Then, more quietly. Are you going there? I stood up, walking toward the window. The garden outside was still, untouched, exactly as I had left it. Yes, I said. What are you going to do? I watched the reflection of myself in the glass. For the first time in years, I didn't see someone fading into the background. I'm going to remind them who I am. Before she could respond, another voice cut through, louder now. Is that your mother? Daniel. Sharp. Irritated. Give me the phone. Clara hesitated. Daniel just. Now. I didn't need to hear the rest. Clara, I said calmly, tell your husband I'll see him tomorrow. Mom, wait. 9 a.m., I added. Then I ended the call. The silence returned. But it felt different now. Not empty. Charged. I placed the phone down and looked back at the document. 3 years. I had watched quietly as Daniel made decisions, moved pieces, reshaped things he didn't understand. I let him believe he was in control. Not because I couldn't stop him, but because I wanted to see how far he would go. Now I knew, and tomorrow, so would everyone else. I closed the folder carefully and returned it to the safe. Then I paused.
No.
Not this time. I took it back out. Tomorrow it wouldn't stay hidden. Tomorrow it would be placed exactly where it belonged. On the table. In front of everyone. I turned off the light and walked out of the study, closing the door behind me. For the first time in a long while, I felt ready. I arrived earlier than necessary. That wasn't accidental. There's a certain power in being the first person in the room. The silence belongs to you. The space adjusts to your presence, and anyone who enters after is already stepping into your territory. The building hadn't changed much. Glass, steel, polished floors, everything designed to reflect success. I remembered when we chose this place. Back then, it was just an empty structure with potential. I saw what it could become before anyone else did. That was always my strength. Seeing ahead. I parked in the space that still carried my husband's name. No one had removed it. That told me more than any report could. Inside, the lobby was quiet. A young receptionist sat behind the desk, tapping lightly on a keyboard. She looked up as I approached. "Good morning. Can I help you?" Her tone was polite, professional, and unfamiliar. "Elizabeth," I said. She blinked.
I'm sorry.
"I'm here to see Daniel." Recognition came slowly, then all at once. "Oh, Elizabeth, I didn't realize." "It's all right," I said gently. "It's been a while." She straightened quickly. "Mr. Carter is in a meeting with the board." Of course he was. "Perfect," I replied. "I'll join them." Her eyes widened slightly. I don't think. He's expecting me," I said. That was enough. People rarely question certainty when it's delivered calmly. I walked toward the elevator without waiting for permission. Behind me, I could feel her hesitation, then urgency. She was probably reaching for the phone. Good. Let them know I was here. The doors closed, and for a brief moment, I was alone with my reflection. Composed. Precise. Unshaken. Exactly as I intended. The executive floor felt both familiar and distant. Some things had changed, artwork replaced, furniture updated, but the structure remained. It always does. People redecorate power, but they rarely understand it. As I stepped out, a few faces turned. Recognition flickered. Whispers followed. "Is that? It can't be."
But it was.
And they knew it. A man stepped out of one of the offices. Thomas, head of operations. Older now, but still sharp-eyed. "Elizabeth," he said, almost disbelieving. I smiled. "It's been a while." He crossed the distance quickly, shaking my hand, then holding it a second longer than necessary. "Too long," he said quietly. "You picked an interesting day to come back." I've always had good timing. His expression shifted, just slightly. Understanding. "Then I suppose I should let you get to it," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You should." The conference room doors stood ahead, frosted glass, voices murmuring behind them. I didn't rush. I walked at a steady pace, each step deliberate. Control isn't loud. It's measured. An assistant stood near the door, clearly nervous. "Mrs. Elizabeth," she corrected herself quickly. "They're in the middle of—" "I know," I said. I reached for the handle. She didn't stop me. The door opened, and just like that, the room fell silent. 8 people at the table.
Familiar faces.
Board members who had watched this company grow from nothing into something powerful. And at the head, Daniel. He looked up, and for a brief second, something broke through his composure.
Surprise.
Then irritation. Then calculation. Elizabeth, he said, standing slowly. We weren't expecting you this early. I prefer not to keep people waiting, I replied. I stepped inside fully, letting the door close behind me. The room adjusted. It always does. One of the older board members, Mr. Reynolds, stood immediately. Elizabeth, it's good to see you. Likewise, I said, offering a small nod. Others followed, greetings, polite, but real. They remembered. That was important. Daniel didn't sit. He stayed standing, trying to maintain control of the room. We're in the middle of an important discussion, he said. Perhaps we can talk afterward. No, I said calmly. Just one word. But it landed. This concerns everyone here. A brief silence. Then Mr. Reynolds gestured. I think we should hear her out. Daniel's jaw tightened. This is a formal meeting, he insisted. And Elizabeth is no longer. Careful, I interrupted softly. Not louder, not harsher, just enough. The room shifted again. I walked to the table and placed the folder down in front of me. I won't take long, I said. Then I opened it. Paper has a sound, a quiet, unmistakable authority. I began handing out copies, one to each board member. Daniel didn't take his immediately. He was watching me instead, trying to read what he had already failed to anticipate. Finally, I placed his copy directly in front of him. You should read it, I said. No one spoke. Pages turned. Eyes moved. And slowly, very slowly, the atmosphere changed. Confusion. Then focus. Then realization. Mr. Reynolds adjusted his glasses, leaning closer to the page. This is the original partnership agreement, he murmured. Yes, I said. Another board member looked up. 51% ownership. I nodded. Daniel finally looked down at his copy. His expression didn't collapse immediately. It resisted. Denied. Then cracked. This doesn't mean anything, he said sharply. It could be outdated. Invalid. It isn't, I replied. Where did you even get this? I tilted my head slightly. That's not the right question. He slammed the paper down. You expect us to believe you've been in control this entire time? No, I said. I expect you to read what's in front of you. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. There's also a succession clause. Yes, I said again. Silence. Heavy. Final. Daniel looked around the room. For support. For doubt. For anything. He found neither. This is ridiculous, he snapped. I've been running this company for 3 years. And how has that been going? I asked. That question hung in the air. No one answered, because everyone knew. I reached into my bag and took out another set of documents. These, I said, placing them on the table, are the financial reports from the last 12 quarters. Daniel stiffened. Don't, he warned. I ignored him. Declining revenue. Lost clients. Unexplained transfers. A board member leaned forward. Transfers? Yes, I said calmly. Multiple. Carefully structured to avoid attention. Daniel's voice rose. This is nonsense. Is it? I asked. I slid one document toward Mr. Reynolds. Take a closer look. He did. And then, his expression changed. Slowly. Visibly. Daniel, he said quietly. What is this? Daniel didn't answer. Because now, he couldn't. And, for the first time since I walked into that room, he wasn't in control. I was. The silence in that room didn't break all at once. It fractured. You could see it happen in stages. First confusion, then discomfort, then something much sharper. Doubt. Not about me. About him. Daniel tried to recover quickly. He always did. That was one of his strengths. Confidence, even when it wasn't justified. These are being misinterpreted, he said, his voice tight but controlled. There are strategic movements you're not aware of. Then explain them. I replied calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. He hesitated. Just for a second. But in a room like that, a second is enough. Mr. Reynolds leaned back slightly, still holding the document. These transfers, they're structured just below reporting thresholds. Another board member added, and they all lead to the same offshore entity. Daniel exhaled sharply. It's standard tax optimization. No, I said. It isn't. I stepped forward, placing one more file on the table. This is the ownership structure of that entity. No one moved at first. Then slowly, one of them opened it. Eyes scanned the page. Brows tightened. And then, there's a connection here, someone said. I watched Daniel. He knew. He knew exactly what they were about to find. It's registered under a third party. The board member continued.
But he stopped.
Looked up. Daniel, this links back to your family. There it was. Out in the open. Irreversible. Daniel's composure cracked. Not dramatically, not explosively, but enough. Enough for everyone to see what had been carefully hidden until now. This is circumstantial, he said quickly. You're drawing conclusions without full context. Then give us the context, Mr. Reynolds said, his tone no longer warm.
Different now. Colder.
Daniel looked around the table again. But this time, the room wasn't with him. It had shifted.
Completely.
I let a moment pass before speaking again. Would you like more context?
I asked.
No one objected. So, I continued. 3 months after my husband died, these transfers began. Small enough not to raise alarms. Consistent enough to form a pattern. And timed perfectly alongside a series of decisions that weakened our position in the market. That's not true, Daniel snapped. Isn't it? I asked. I turned slightly toward Thomas. How many major clients have we lost in the past year?
He didn't hesitate.
3 key accounts. And the projected growth we had before that? Significantly higher. I nodded, then looked back at Daniel. You weren't just mismanaging, I said. You were preparing. For what? Someone asked quietly. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I took out one final document and placed it down.
Carefully.
For this. Mr. Reynolds reached for it first. He read the header. Then his expression hardened. A preliminary agreement? Another board member leaned in. With a competitor? A pause. Then, this is a potential acquisition proposal. The word hung in the air. Acquisition. Not partnership. Not merger. Takeover. Daniel's voice came fast now. It wasn't finalized. But it was planned, I said. That's how business works, he shot back. You explore options. You don't sabotage your own company to make those options more attractive. That landed.
Hard.
He stepped forward slightly. You don't understand the pressure we were under. No, I said quietly. You don't understand what you were entrusted with. The room fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't confusion. It was judgment. One of the board members spoke, slower now. This agreement, it includes a personal clause. Another turned the page. Consulting compensation, and then, the number. This is substantial. Daniel didn't speak, because there was nothing left to defend. You are going to sell the company, Thomas said, his voice low, and secure your own position in the process. Daniel clenched his jaw. I was trying to save it. At whose expense? I asked. No answer. Of course not. Because the answer was obvious. Everyone in that room knew it. I let the silence stretch just long enough. Then I straightened slightly and spoke clearly. My first decision as majority owner, I said, is to remove Daniel from his position, effective immediately. The words were calm, measured, final. Daniel let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You think you can just do that? Yes, I said. You need approval. I looked at Mr. Reynolds. He didn't hesitate. The agreement is clear, he said. She has that authority. Daniel's expression changed again.
Not anger this time.
Something else. Something closer to fear. This isn't over, he said.
No, irraplia.
It isn't. He looked around the room one last time, but there was nothing there for him anymore.
No alais. No hesitation.
Just distance. The kind that appears when trust disappears. Security was called. Quietly. Efficiently.
He didn't resist.
But as he walked past me, he leaned in slightly. You'll regret this, he said under his breath. I didn't react, because threats only matter when they come from someone who still has power. And he didn't. Not anymore. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the room changed again. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted into something else. Urgency, responsibility, reality. Questions started immediately. What happens now? What about the acquisition attempt? Do we address this publicly? I raised a hand slightly, and they stopped. Not because I demanded it, because they were ready to listen. We stabilize first, I said, internally and externally.
No panic. No rash decisions.
They nodded. We conduct a full audit, I continued. Complete transparency.
No exceptions.
More nods. And we rebuild what was nearly lost. That part landed differently, because now they understood how close it had come. Mr. Reynolds looked at me carefully. You've been watching this for a while. Yes. And you waited. Yes. Why? I held his gaze. Because timing matters. A small pause. Then, a slight smile. Not from me. From him. Your husband used to say that. I know, I replied. I taught him. That earned a quiet reaction around the table. Not surprise. Recognition. The pieces were finally falling into place, not just about the situation, but about me. Who I had been. Who I still was. The meeting didn't end immediately. There were decisions to outline, actions to assign, damage to assess. But the foundation had already shifted. Control had returned. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. After it was over, the room slowly emptied. Conversations continued in low tones, plans already forming. I stayed behind, just for a moment, looking at the chair at the head of the table, the one Daniel had been sitting in, the one everyone assumed belonged to someone else. I walked over to it,
Paused. Then sat down. Not to claim it.
but to remind myself I never lost it. I simply chose the moment to take it back. By the time I returned home, the silence felt different. It wasn't the hollow quiet I had grown used to over the past few years. It wasn't the kind that comes from absence. This was something else, something steadier, heavier, like the air before a storm finally breaks. I set my keys down slowly and walked through the house without turning on the lights. I didn't need them. I knew every corner, every shadow, every quiet creak in the floorboards. This house had been my constant long before Daniel ever stepped into it and decided what it was worth. Now, for the first time in a long while, it felt like mine again. But peace doesn't last long when someone has just lost everything. The call came the next morning, not from his personal number, from the house phone. I knew immediately what that meant. I answered without hesitation. You think you've won. Daniel's voice was rough, strained, unsteady. There was something underneath it this time. Not control. Not arrogance. Desperation. Where are you?
I asked.
A pause. Then a bitter laugh. Where do you think? My grip tightened slightly around the phone. In my house. Not a question. A statement. Your house, he repeated mockingly. Funny how that works. Daniel, I said evenly. You need to leave. Do I? He shot back. Last I checked, I'm still married to your daughter. That makes me family, doesn't it? Or does that only apply when it benefits you? I didn't answer that, because he didn't deserve one. Instead, I said, Is Clara there? Silence. Then,
No.
Relief came fast, but I didn't let it show. Then listen carefully. I continued. You are not welcome there. You no longer have any authority, legal or otherwise. Leave now. Another laugh.
Short. Sharp. You always did this, he said.
That calm voice. Like you're above everything. I am above this, I replied. That made him snap. You humiliated me.
No, I said.
You exposed yourself. Something crashed in the background.
Glass.
I closed my eyes for a brief second. Daniel, I said more firmly, don't do anything you can't undo. Oh, I think we're past that, he said. His breathing was heavier now. Uneven. You think this ends with a meeting? He continued. You think you just walk in, take everything, and I disappear? You've already disappeared, I said quietly. You just haven't realized it yet. That hit. I could hear it in the silence that followed. Then, I want a deal. There it was. The last attempt. What kind of deal? I asked. Reinstate me, he said quickly. Give me control over the international division. I can fix what's happening. I can stabilize everything. I almost smiled. Even now, he thought this was negotiable. No, I said. You're making a mistake, he pressed. There are things you don't know. Things your husband never told you. That was his angle. Secrets. Leverage. Too late. Whatever you think you have, I replied, it's not enough. You're bluffing. And you're panicking. Another crash. Louder this time. I turned slightly, already reaching for my phone with my other hand. Daniel, I said, if you damage anything in that house. What? He cut in. You'll call the police? Create a scandal? Drag your own family through the mud? I didn't hesitate. Yes. That stopped him. For a moment. You wouldn't. Try me. Silence again. Then, you've always underestimated me, he said, quieter now.
No, irraplia.
I understood you exactly. That was the truth. And he knew it. I covered the phone slightly and dialed security. Short instructions.
Clear.
Immediate. When I brought the phone back, he was still there. Still breathing. Still unraveling. I can still destroy this, he said. The company. The house. Your reputation. No, I said calmly. You can't. You don't know that.
Ido.
How? He demanded. I paused. Just long enough. Because you already lost the only thing that made you dangerous. And what's that? He asked. Control. The word settled heavily between us. In the distance, I heard it. Sirens. Faint, but approaching. You called them, he said. Yes. You think this ends here? I think this ends today. Voices in the background now. Shouting. Movement.
A door.
Open up. Daniel's breathing changed again. Faster now. More frantic. This isn't over, he said. It is for you, I replied. And then I ended the call. The silence that followed was sharp. Final. I stood still for a moment, letting everything settle. Then I exhaled. Slowly. When I arrived at the house, the damage was already visible. A broken window. Shattered glass scattered across the floor. One of the chairs overturned, but the structure remained. The foundation held. Security was still there. Police as well. Statements were taken. Details recorded. Daniel had been removed. Arrested. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. Just inevitable. Inside, I walked through each room carefully. Not to assess the damage, but to reassure myself. Everything that mattered was still there. The study door was intact. I opened it slowly. Nothing touched. Books exactly where they should be. The desk untouched. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel it. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Something quieter. Closure. A soft knock broke the silence. I turned. Clara stood in the doorway. Her eyes were red. Tired. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in a long while, I saw her clearly. Not as someone caught in between, but as someone finally seeing the truth. "This isn't your fault," I said. She shook her head. "I should have seen it." "Maybe," I replied. "But now you do." A pause. Then, "What happens next?" she asked. I stepped closer. "Now," I said, "we rebuild. Not just the company. Not just the house. Everything." She nodded slowly. And this time, there was no hesitation. 6 months later, everything looked different, but more importantly, everything felt different. Not perfect, not effortless, but stable, intentional. Ours. The company had recovered faster than most expected. That surprised them. It didn't surprise me. The foundation had never been weak, only neglected. Once we removed the instability, things began to correct themselves. Clients returned, cautiously at first, then with confidence. New contracts followed. The audit, though difficult, became our strongest statement. Transparency rebuilt trust far quicker than silence ever could. I worked long days again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There's a difference. I was back in the office every morning before most of the staff arrived. I reviewed reports, met with department heads, listened more than I spoke, and when I did speak, people listened. Not out of obligation, out of recognition. They finally understood who I was. Or maybe they finally saw what had always been there. At home, things were changing too. Clara moved back in with the children just a few weeks after everything happened. At first, it was temporary. A practical decision. A place to regroup while the divorce moved forward. But gradually something shifted. The house felt alive again. Mornings weren't silent anymore. There was movement, conversation, occasional chaos. Emma would leave her books on the kitchen table. Tyler would ask questions about things he suddenly found interesting, business, astronomy, anything that connected him to a world he was beginning to understand differently. And Clara, she changed the most. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but steadily. She started asking questions. Not just about what had happened, but about what came before. About the company. About me. About her father. One evening, we sat together in the study. Our study now. The second desk I had added stood beside the original one. Not as a replacement, but as a continuation. A reminder that nothing meaningful is built alone. "I keep thinking about everything I missed," she said quietly, looking around the room. "All those years. I thought I understood how things worked." I didn't interrupt. "I thought Dad was the one holding everything together," she continued, "and that you just supported him." I smiled slightly. That's what most people thought. She looked at me, then really looked. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I considered the question carefully. "Because at the time, it wasn't necessary," I said. "And later, it became easier not to." "That doesn't sound like you." It wasn't, I admitted. A pause settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just honest. I think I was afraid, she said finally. Of what? Of seeing things differently, she replied. Of realizing that I had been wrong. About you. About him. About everything. That's not something to be afraid of, I said gently. It is when it changes everything. I nodded. Yes, I said. It is. She leaned back slightly, exhaling. I don't want to make the same mistake again. You won't, I said. How do you know? Because now you're paying attention. That was enough. Outside, the garden had begun to bloom again. I had replanted most of it, not because it needed to be replaced, but because it needed renewal. Stronger roots. More resilient varieties. Things that could withstand harsher seasons. Clara noticed. You changed the garden, she said one afternoon as we walked through it. Yes. It looks stronger. That was the idea. She smiled faintly, like everything else. Exactly. The company hosted a small gathering a few weeks later. Not formal, not extravagant, just a quiet evening for the people who had stayed, who had believed, who had chosen to stand firm when things could have easily fallen apart. We held it at the house. That mattered, because this house had nearly been taken. And now it was filled again. Laughter, conversation, movement. People who understood what this place represented. Not just a structure, but a history, a foundation. At one point, I stood slightly apart from the crowd watching. Thomas speaking with one of the newer managers. Mr. Reynolds seated comfortably, as if he had always belonged there. Clara talking with Patricia, more confident now, more present. And the children, running through the garden, free in a way I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I allowed myself to simply observe, to take it in, not as someone who had regained control, but as someone who had reclaimed something deeper. Myself. Later that evening, after everyone had left and the house had settled into a softer quiet, I returned to the study. I didn't turn on the main light, just the lamp on the desk. Warm. Focused. I sat down slowly. Across from me, the second desk stood ready, occupied now, not physically, but symbolically. A space for continuation, for partnership, for something that would carry forward. I reached into the drawer and took out the original agreement, the same document that had changed everything. I looked at it for a long moment, then closed it again, not because it was no longer important, but because I no longer needed to prove anything. A soft knock at the door. Clara stepped in. Still working? She asked. Always thinking, I replied. She smiled, then hesitated. I was wondering, she began, then paused. Yes, if, maybe, when things settle a bit more, I could get involved. In the company. I studied her for a moment, not critically, carefully. Why? I asked. Because I want to understand it, she said. Not from the outside, not secondhand. I want to actually be part of it. And if it's harder than you expect? It will be, she said. But that's not a reason not to try. I nodded slowly. That's true. A small pause. Then, we'll start with the basics, I said. No shortcuts. I don't want shortcuts. Good. She smiled again. And this time, it wasn't uncertain. After she left, I sat there a little longer. The clock in the hallway chimed softly. Another day ending. Another beginning waiting. I stood, turned off the light, and paused at the doorway. For years, I had been defined by roles. A wife, a mother, a widow. All of them true, but incomplete. Now, I was something else entirely, not because I had become someone new, but because I had finally stepped back into who I had always been. I closed the door gently behind me, and walked forward, not into something uncertain, but into something that was finally mine.